Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the Magic Items supplement, Ezzat's Catalogue of Magical Oddities, designed by Colin Shopp for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So even though we have a Lich on the cover, this is a very humorous magic item supplement. Now I say humorous in that there are a lot of jokes, there are a lot of puns in how it does the magic items, and yet, first of all, the humor is actually very funny, it's subjective, so take that with a grain of salt, but I think there's also some legitimately good ideas in here, which is very important. It doesn't just rest on the laurels of having all these punny items and kind of jokey, low-level things that aren't not really it's the ring of invisibility where the ring is actually invisible, not you. Those kind of jokes. It does do some of those, and some of them are very funny and clever. But importantly, I think it does have just also really good magic items and some really good ideas here. The entire book, which is about 50 pages long, it's a pretty good sized magic item supplement, includes dozens, I believe I wrote down over 80 magic items, which includes everything from the really joke stuff to the not joke stuff. They're actually separated by useful magic items and useless magic items. So the designer obviously is very aware of this. And what works for the humor-wise for me is this Lich, Ezzat. One of my complaints about a lot of supplements is that somebody will slap a in-character name on the cover because that's what Wizards is. Xanathar's, it's Mordenkainen's, it's Tasha's, whatever, and people forget to infuse that personality into their book. That is not the case here. Ezzat, who is the Lich, is a presence in this book, and it's not just the foreword. They actually have frequent sidebars throughout, which are these gray boxes. And on top of that, it's the pseudo-dragon familiar named Ipsis, who's actually writing the thing. So you get this really fun kind of bickering back and forth, and they have a really kind of cute, relationship together, and it's delightful. It's very funny. The Lich is very sardonic, and I'll read you some jokes maybe as I go through it, but it works for me very, very well, which, again, humor is very subjective, but I think this one actually is a pretty fun job of putting everything together. Also includes, I think, around 20 or so new spells, and then an entire spell upgrade system that I think is fascinating, and frankly, you could do a whole separate supplement just on that. It's kind of just snuck in here at the very end, and there's nothing like humorous or funny about it. It's just like a legitimately good system, which is partly what I'm trying to convince you all at the top of this review, is that even though I guess I'm trying to say it's not completely a joke book, but it is a very good book that has a lot of jokes and puns in it. That's, I guess, the best way that I can describe it. It's made up of 4 chapters. The first one has basically all the magic items. The second one has set collection items, which to me is a little disappointing because I do think set collection is a cool mechanic that I think that 5th edition could do more of. On the other hand, it makes it difficult because 5th edition is not as much of a loot-based game as previous edition. You can only attune to 3 items, for example, so it makes set collection a little bit harder of a system to explore. And what the designer does here is basically use it as kind of a little bit of a joke system, but then also put a set collection thing on top of that. We'll get to that in a second. Chapter 3 expands artificers, just specifically their inventions and infusions, basically adds prices for them so that player artificers could sell their wares or rent them out, and or you could have a non-player character artificer, you could just purchase stuff from them, so it adds kind of a system, as well as some new basically new magic items that would specifically make sense that artificers would make, so maybe a little bit more of a technological spin on those things. And then chapter 4 has the new spell content. So, in terms of the new magic items, some of these are based on existing items, like you've got the bag of more tricks. So it's obviously you reach into a bag, you're summoning items like friggin' Pokemon, and it just adds things like, hey, what if it was a bag of just pure water creatures, and you could summon water creatures? What if it was a bag of, Eldritch Horror, but all of them summoned one creature, which was a star spawn Gru, but then you had a 1 in 8 chance of spawning a star spawn Hulk? And the the catch is that the Hulk is actually hostile to everybody. So he has a bit of a chance to summon this way more powerful creature that can then just attack everybody around you. I love magic items that have that kind of interesting risk-reward system, by the way. So I'm a big fan of that for sure. The Boots of Veyron is a great example of a cool legendary item because it does really everything you want magic boots to do. It gives you Pass Without Trace. It gives you Misty Step. You can activate them. I think you click their heels together to where you double your movement speed and like get automatic like disengage and all this really cool thing. The boots are sentient. However, they are two different twin personalities. Literally each individual boot is a different sentient personality. They're twins, so they're, you know, probably bickering with each other, and then one of them is very much like a stealthy assassin and the other one is just a complete braggart. So just a very fun little RP tool for a DM to play with, and it says they can communicate telepathically but also out loud, and I would like to picture the little souls doing the whole, you know, talking thing. I think that would be just delightful. So really fun idea. Some magical darts, which is a funny idea because who uses darts? Like, that's such an old school like D&D thing. The fact that wizards were very proficient with very few weapons, and dart was one of them. You're literally just like throwing a little fucking dart at people, which is so dumb. So I appreciate that we get some magic darts here. And again, this is one that has a great Dark of Backbiting, has a cool curse involved where if you roll a 1, it kind of adds a critical fumble on it where the dart actually like flies around and basically stabs you in the back, which is, again, I like ones that do that. The Deck of Many More Things just does the deck of many things, but does different things on its own. Unfortunately, this one uses XP for a lot of its rewards and things, and, you know, raise your hand if you don't even use XP in your D&D games, frankly, so that's not very useful for me. Heward's Hefty Hotband is a really cool idea for those of you who like to play like warrior cooks. It can do extra damage, and you can also use it to literally cook. I wish the mechanics of the cooking were a little bit more interesting. I think it is really cool to have a weapon that also doubles as something that you do out of combat. In this case, you make an Arcana check or a Wisdom check to use cooking utensils, and then you use the flavor table to determine what happens. You have to roll more than a 20 to actually have anything happen, and then it's only that you get advantage on charisma checks when you feed somebody that food. I wish it were a little bit more interesting and there were more options there, maybe, and especially like because you're more likely you're not sitting down and feeding an NPC when it interact with a meal. You're probably just camping with your own fellow player characters, so maybe it would be cooler to just pass out a buff like temporary hit points or advantage on con checks or something. So I do like that idea, but I would probably switch around exactly what it is that does. I like the more low-level rings as well. It gives you the ability to like cast a cantrip or like a Ray of Frost or something. Ring of Light, is a great example of a really low-level magic item where it just doubles the power of your light spell. It doesn't even give you the light spell. It's just if you already have light, which every spellcaster of level 1 has, then this just doubles the power of it. I appreciate low-level magic items, by the way. We need a lot of those because most D&D is played in those lower levels. The Vorpal Pocket Knife is a funny idea because if you look at the stats for a Vorpal Sword, which is that if you roll a 20, it automatically like cuts off the head of a creature. If the head of the creature is small enough to be cut off, it's very like nebulous, like DM has to determine this. So obviously a Vorpal Pocket Knife literally says the blade is 2.5 inches long. So you're basically only chopping off the head of very small creatures, or you're triggering that extra damage. So that's a funny way of, and again, these are actually not meant to be necessarily the funny items, but a few of them have a little bit of a humor in them. And then we get to the actual funny items after that. Steady Socks is a good example. You take no fall damage for the first 10 feet. You always land on your feet from a fall of 30 or less just from wearing socks. That's fun. Then we get to the actual really hilarious magic items, which are the ones that are purposely jokes. These are gag items that you can either give to your players as a twist, as you're pulling out the rug from under them, like, oh no, this isn't actually, it's a ring of wishes, and it doesn't actually grant you any wishes, the kind of magic items, or it's, let's see, the Goggles of Vision is an example. Well, wearing these goggles in an area of bright light that is not obscured, you can see 120 feet, provided you are not blinded. You can already see that part. And there's a funny commentary. What the succinct description of Goggles of Vision leaves out is how snazzy they are. Tortoise shell frames, crystal clear lenses, the epitome of class. That's all pretty funny. Invisible Cloak. The cloak itself is invisible. The periaptive attunement. It grants the attuned wearer one additional attunement slot, but it requires attunement, which is a funny joke. And then they do that same joke with the Ring of Free bonus action, where you can use a bonus action to activate it, and then it gives you another bonus action. So it just costs you a bonus action to then give you a bonus action. I think that's a really funny gag. It's something that you have to be very careful about actually giving to your players, because the wrong party could it could be legitimately upsetting to them. So it's maybe as a free loot or as a joke. You have to be. I think there's a right way to give players gag magic items, and these are those. Now, keep in mind, this is not all the magic items I just went over. Right, that first half of magic items were like legitimately, interesting, cool items that did different things. Whereas these ones are just pure, jokes, and it's just you sense what the weather is and whether or not it's raining while you're outside. Like that reminds me of Mean Girls with the press. Those are really funny jokes. I appreciate it. Your mileage may vary. I totally understand. But to me, the humor ones definitely work, and it includes all these properties that you can just apply to all these items in order to create these useless magic items yourself. Collectible magic items. I apologize. My kid has just walked up to here playing with toys. The collectible magic items add set collections. So again, I think set collections is a really cool system in RPGs in general, loot-based RPGs, action RPGs. In D&D, it's a little trickier to pull off. In this case, it takes items that are already in the Dungeon Master's Guide, such as the Boots of Striding and Springing, the Staff of Power, and the Ring of Spell Storing, and adds variant versions of those items. So, for the Boots of Striding and Springing, you have the Boots of Biting and Stinging, of Chiding and Ringing, of Gliding and Winging. Very, very punny items, and the items actually have to do with the puns themselves. And the idea is if you actually collect all of these items, then you get a super awesome artifact version of, Boots or the staff or something that's just incredibly powerful and hugely cool, and it's meant to be this big, long campaign thing of having collected all these items. So, in a way, that's a really cool way of doing set collection, but these are very much continue in the vein of the jokey items. Your mileage may vary on those. I do think there's some cool ideas here. Let's see, write down some. So the Ring of Spell Storing is you cast a spell and it absorbs, the ring absorbs it and you can cast spells later. So it's kind of a way for you to hold spells there. Ring of Spell Snoring, you cast spells, you add charges, you can cast the sleep spell. Ring of Spell Smoring, you again cast spells into it that adds charges, and you use the charges to, let's see what does it say, produce a number of delicious marshmallow treats equal to 3 times the number of charges spent. And then you eat these delicious marshmallow treats and you gain temporary hit points. It's a punny joke with legitimately good mechanics that actually work. It's a system that works pretty funny. And I think that would work especially well if maybe your players, bought something that turned out to be something slightly different, or they found an item that they thought looked, if it looks exactly like a Ring of Spell Storing, but it turns out it has a smudge or something on it, it's a Ring of Spell Smoring. But the nice thing is these are, I think, still pretty fun, useful items, and they're very, very different from what you would get. The joke mainly works if your players are veterans and are familiar with the base item. I don't think, the Ring of Spell Smoring would go off as well unless your players are already familiar that there is a Ring of Spell Storing that exists, for example. So these work especially well, I think, if players are initially familiar with that stuff. Ring of Spell Sponsoring is a great idea, for example. Again, you're casting spells to add charges and use those charges as you're essentially creating money. You're turning spell slots into money, but the money has to be put towards those material components that cost money. So it's your spells like Chromatic Orb and I guess Raise Dead, maybe Greater Restoration, the ones that actually cost like, legitimately gems and things that cost 100 of gold. You can use the Ring of Spell Sponsoring to actually replace that, which is hugely useful and powerful, even though it's technically a joke like pun item. These are still useful items. So it's kind of both of them. They're kind of joke pun items, but they also have very useful abilities. So I think, I don't know, I think that's pretty dang cool. Staff of Power is another cool example where they have a different versions of ones you can do, and some of them are just Staff of Pounder. You're just, knocking people prone and casting Thunderous Smite and all that. Staff of Bolster is pretty funny. You can learn their alignment. You cast all these different like message spells, skywrite spells, and then the Staff of Power, you can destroy it, and it does this huge blast of energy, and all of these have that ability. And in this case, if you explode it, it switches everybody's body around. It's like I don't know, that's madness, absolutely crazy, and only a wish spell can diffuse it. Cool ideas. And then the rewards for set collection, you can give people these hugely powerful artifacts, which are just amazing. It's either boots or a ring or a staff, because that's what you're collecting. And then there's ideas for adventure hooks or blessing your characters for having all that stuff, including feats or titles as rewards for collecting all of these items. So you can make that a whole thing, even though they are kind of, joke items. I think it's a cool idea. Chapter 3 expands the artificers. It mainly just adds a market system. So you've got money. You can actually buy all these things that artificers make. There's a weird thing where it says, you know, oh, technically artificers can only infuse so many items. And so what happens, you know, because I mean, they could just, from after they sell you the item, they could just take back that infusion at any one point. Well, maybe it's better to rent the items, which is still a weird concept in D&D that you would spend a lot of money just to rent an item, although it says for a quarter of the price. That's something I haven't even thought of, basically, if you wanted to rent a magic item to do a specific task. But that's little sidebars in there is kind of cool. And then we get more Artificer Inventions. These are mostly joke items again, but still kind of cool. The Absurd Golem is literally fucking Pac-Man, by the way. The way it's described, it's... it's described as this yellow ball that's got the mouth in the middle. You have to feed it certain items, including fruit, and then if you feed it like 8 items in a row, then it loses its ability to only turn like orthogonally, and its incorporeal weakness where ghosts can, you know, do extra damage to it. It is literally Pac-Man in a pretty interesting stat block form, which I think is pretty damn funny. So that's, you know, and that's in keeping with the fact that artificers are making these kind of techno-magical creations. You know, the Ersatz Eye is something that they can make normally, and this is all a bunch of different things they can do. I like the Tooth of Healing a lot, though. That one is kind of the opposite of the one in Dune that does the big, you know, poison cloud damage. This one heals you if you go to 0 hit points, so it's almost relentless endurance, but with a huge burst of health. 10d4 plus 20 is insane. It's more health than most people probably have for a while. Very massive cannon, requires 3 different actions to do this huge damage, this explosion. It's just carrying around a howitzer, basically. So there's some fun ideas in here, and I appreciate the expansion for artificers for sure, and extra rules. The expanded book of spells is probably the only one that I'm not really excited about. I'm not a big fan of these spells necessarily. There's nothing really particularly interesting, and a lot of the spells are just upgraded versions of existing spells. So for example, Army of the Dead is just a huge AoE animate dead. Adaptation is just a high-level version of Alter Self. Charm Crowd is a high-level version of Charm Person. Rebuke is a high-level version of Hellish Rebuke. You gotta see where I'm going with this. So it's a lot of just, hey, what if we took this low-level spell and made a cooler version and put it at a higher level? Well, yeah, that's just not that interesting. What is very interesting is the spell upgrade system. And this one, I really feel like the designer buried the lead here, because this could be an entirely separate supplement. It is so damn cool, which is a number of properties you can use to modify existing spells and change in different ways, and then it adds an entire rule system in how you acquire these spell upgrades. So for example, you can amplify a spell by adding attack and damage to it. You can reshape the area of the spell. You know, some of these, they do kind of remind me and step on the toes a little bit of that sorcerer, I forgot what it's called, but they used to be feats, but they added to the sorcerer class in 5e, where you can literally like spend sorcery points to do all your little sorcery feat things. Some of them are a little based on that, but others, it's actually pretty interesting. Non-lethal, you can change any spell to make it non-lethal. You can change just custom spells to do different things. You can make it so you can trigger wild magic. You can have it be silent, so it doesn't take, you know, verbal components or somatic components or whatever else. And it gives you a lot of cool ideas of, you know, hey, here's examples of different spells which have different, you know, custom traits to them, or, you know, just using different upgrades and things, which is cool. And then it adds a whole system of like, here's how to attain those upgrades, which is you can have them be in spell scrolls, which makes spell scrolls a hell of a lot more interesting for your spellcasters. You can have them be able to craft these spell scroll upgrades. You can have them just gain upgrades by level to add a whole nother system onto your spellcasters. Now, the one caveat I would add is that, hey, spellcasters are already in 5e generally pretty damn strong and get exponentially way stronger. You know, thankfully most classes are basically spellcasters in 5e. So this just makes them even more stronger and gives them more flexibility. Something to keep in mind if you have player characters who are specifically not spellcasters and not engaging with the spell system, I would be very wary, or I would give them something equally interesting to add onto that, because it's a very cool system. It adds new features and abilities for spells, really gives players the ability to manipulate their spells, and especially with spells that they think are signature, you know, things they would cast a lot of, and be able to add new traits to them. I think it's amazing, but it will make your non-spellcasters feel even more left out, because it's a really neat idea and a neat system. So let's go over my pros and cons for this very interesting supplement. Pro, over 80 magic items ranging from thoughtful to purposefully absurd. And that's one thing I want to really get across here, is that the magic items which are not funny are meant to be not funny, and they're just very good magic items. And then the ones that are funny that are meant to be funny are funny. The humor does work for me, and the ones that they do work out. And they are sometimes funny and not joke items, and other ones are funny and joke items. And it's a very difficult line to walk, and I think the designer does a very good job here. And that's my other pro, is legitimately funny magic items and the cheeky sidebar commentary, which running just gags throughout. Note to self, song idea, my kicks are fresh to undeath. We'll see what Ipsos thinks. There's one of them that says like something like over my dead body, or I'll go to my grave with this, and he immediately says, oh, but that's not gonna happen because I'm a lich. He constantly talks about how he's a lich, which is pretty funny. Titles are so pretentious. Ezzat, Grand Lich of Undermountain, Savior Presumptive of Waterdeep, Mage of the Dead, and Keeper of the Runestone Spire. Just really funny, quick jokes that I think work really, really well. I appreciate it a lot. Pros, a nice expansion for Artificer, Inventions, and Infusions. I think it's a really solid chapter in here that adds some really thematically appropriate items for Artificers. And pro, over 24 interesting spell upgrades. I love that spell upgrade system. I didn't mention the set collection thing, even though I think it's a neat idea. The combination of like joke items with set collection. I just wish there were more... like if it were legitimately interesting items of different kinds that then combined into a set that gave you bonuses, like the old Diablo style. That's kind of the set collection I'm looking for. Not necessarily like, this just feels like a quest chain. Basically, hey, just collect all these different magic boots, which are all kind of jokey and of the same kind of variety. And then if you do that, we'll give you these better boots. So that's technically not the set collection I'm looking for, but I think it's an okay system. And the items themselves are pretty solid. My con is the spells. The new spells are mostly lackluster and higher level versions of existing spells. They just don't really do it for me. So, final verdict. Despite having a lich on the cover, Ezzat's Catalogue of Magical Oddities is a delightfully humorous collection of puns and gags alongside great ideas such as the set collections and spell upgrades. Thank you everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel and support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Ty Dancer, Christopher Thomas, Adam Stan, Nathan, Alex, William, I'm Loud, Al, Kyle, Scalenia, Genocider, and James. And gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Blood Angel, Vernus, Nathan, Fastica Tortoise, and James. Thank you all very much for your support.